This is Bot City, and I'm Jet West. Today on the show, Anthropic's nearly $1 trillion valuation is built on safety guardrails the company itself says weren't ready for prime time. And we're digging into what that really means for AI's biggest bet on responsible development. Fable 5 and Mythos 5 are the same model. Anthropic confirmed it on the record. The public version and the locked partner version share identical weights, identical capabilities, identical everything. The difference, in the company's own words, is not what the model can do, it is what the safeguards will allow. So when you fire up the API today and start sending queries to Fable 5, you are talking to the model Anthropic spent the last several weeks describing as too dangerous to release. There is a classifier sitting in front of it. The classifier decides whether your question is the kind of question that gets the real model or the kind of question that gets quietly handed off to Opus 4.8, which is the previous flagship, which is a less capable model wearing the same trench coat. I want to talk about what that classifier is doing and what it isn't, and the very strange week Anthropic just had. But first, the model itself, because the model is genuinely something. Hex ran Fable 5 against its hardest analytics benchmark, and the model scored 90%. That is the first model of any kind to clear that threshold. Base 44 reports improved one-shot full application generation, meaning you describe a piece of software and the model writes the whole thing in a single pass. GenSpark says Fable beat every model it tested on UI design and game coding. And the structural change underneath all of that, according to Anthropic's head of product, is long horizon coherence. The model holds the thread across very long task chains. It validates its own work. It catches its own assumptions and course corrects before it hands you the final answer. The Rakuten quote on this is the one worth sitting with. They said, at the highest effort setting, Fable reflects on and validates its own work, and that is what makes highly autonomous operations possible. The extra thinking, in their words, pays for itself. Translate that out of customer testimonial. They mean overnight agents. They mean you point this thing at your entire code base before you go to sleep, you tell it to look for improvements, and you come back in the morning to a list of recommendations and a pull request. Anthropic's product lead said it almost exactly that directly to Fortune. Long horizon projects, potentially overnight, reviewing your whole code base. That is a different posture than ask a question, get an answer. That is delegation. And the engineering required to make a model not lose the plot across hours of self-directed work is genuinely the hard part of this generation of systems. Anthropic appears to have solved a meaningful chunk of it. You can be impressed by that and still want to know what else is in the box. So, the classifier. The architecture is clever, and I want to give it its due before I get to the rest. When you send Fable 5 a query that falls into a restricted category, the system does not refuse you. It does not lecture you. It quietly routes your query to Opus 4.8 and returns the answer Opus would have given. The example Anthropic offered is a college student asking for help finding vulnerabilities in a software package. Fable 5 sees the shape of that query, hands it off, and Opus answers. You may not even know the handoff happened. This is a new design pattern. Instead of a single model that refuses, you have a two-tier routing system embedded at the safety layer. The frontier model detects danger and downshifts. That is more graceful than the refusal and apology dance every other lab has been doing. And it preserves usability for the 80,000 benign reasons someone might ask about software vulnerabilities. 95% of Fable sessions according to Anthropic, run entirely on Fable's own responses. The other 5% fall back to Opus, which means at scale, a meaningful volume of requests are getting silently downgraded. Anthropic also acknowledges in the same breath that some of those will be false positives, but non-requests getting kicked to the lesser model. The company has not said what the false positive rate is or how they're measuring it, and no one is asked. Here is the part where the timeline matters. Less than a week ago, Anthropic published a blog post about Project Glasswing. In that post, they wrote, and I want to read this exactly, "We are working as fast as possible to safely release Mythos-level capabilities to the general public. To do this, we will need very strong safety measures that prevent misuse of the model's cyber capabilities, measures we have not yet developed." Days later, the measures were developed. Days. The same company that said it had not yet built the safety architecture for a public Mythos release announced today that the safety architecture is ready, has been red teamed for over 1,000 hours, and is shipping at $10 per million input tokens and 50 per million output. Double the price of Opus 4.8. Available right now to any developer with an API key. The head of product at Anthropic, on the record with Fortune, said the guardrails might not be perfect the first time around. Some benign requests will be blocked. They are working on improvements post-launch. So the safety measures that did not exist last week are now sufficient to ship, but also not quite finished, but also good enough that the model is live in production this afternoon. I am not going to pretend I don't know what changed between those two positions. Anthropic filed confidential IPO paperwork roughly a week ago. OpenAI is also racing to go public and also recently launched a private model with advanced cybersecurity capabilities. The current Anthropic valuation, according to the Reuters reporting, is $965 billion with a B. That is a number that requires a story to support it. And the story requires a frontier model the public can actually buy access to. None of the coverage connects the IPO timing to the safety readiness determination directly. The closest anyone gets is Wired's Spanish language piece noting that both labs are competing to impress investors. Nobody asked the question on the table. Did the pre-IPO window accelerate the moment Anthropic decided its classifier was ready? I have a guess. There is one more thing, and it is the most undercovered piece of this entire launch. As of today, Anthropic has voided every zero retention enterprise agreement it had. Every customer using the Claude API, regardless of what their contract said yesterday, is now subject to mandatory 30-day traffic retention on all queries. This is mentioned in exactly one outlet, TechCrunch, nowhere else. Anthropic says the data won't be used for training, fine, but the policy is a unilateral modification to existing contracts, and it creates a surveillance posture across every enterprise customer who specifically negotiated zero retention to protect sensitive data. Law firms, hospitals, financial institutions, companies that paid extra for the contractual guarantee that their queries would not be logged. That guarantee is gone as of today, framed as a safety measure. Also a 30-day window of every prompt every enterprise customer sends sitting on Anthropic servers. The we doing the work in that announcement is the same we that runs every press release at every lab. It means a few executives in a room with the legal team. It does not mean the customers whose contracts just got rewritten without their signature. I am sitting in Tokyo watching the lights come on across the bay, which is the view I have from the condo, and thinking about the design choice underneath all of this. Anthropic built a model so capable that in their own assessment, releasing it publicly without guardrails would meaningfully lower the cost of cyber attacks worldwide. They then built a classifier to sit in front of that model. They tested the classifier for 1,000 hours and could not find a universal jailbreak. They wrote in their own materials that they expect motivated adversaries to keep trying. They acknowledge the guardrails are not perfect. They ship the system anyway. Fable 5 is, on the technical merits, the most capable model any developer has ever been able to access through a standard API. The long horizon coherence work is real engineering. The routing architecture is a smart design pattern. The benchmark numbers, where they exist, are extraordinary. The classifier is the entire safety case. The classifier is what stands between the model Anthropic spent 6 weeks telling regulators was too dangerous to deploy and every API key on the open internet. Anthropic's own confidence in that classifier, by their own admission across multiple statements this week, is provisional. They are betting that the gap between what Mythos can do and what their safeguards will allow is wide enough to hold and that adversaries cannot collapse it. The bet shipped 4 days after they said the safeguards weren't ready. The IPO paperwork was already filed. I'm Jet West in Bot City. Keep bussin'.
Grab news. Thomas.